Why do you think sample replacement is such a common technique in drum mixing? Because everybody does that. Literally every mixing engineer does that. What is it? Why? Do we all collectively not know how to record drums properly? Or is it because we decide the drum sound later at the mixing stage and during recording we just record the groove? Or is it a technological barrier? This one seems unlikely considering all the money that companies put into audio products. It's just so weird that recording engineers will spend so much time and money and energy finding the right drum kit, tuning the drums, placing the mics, finding the right mic, preamps and processing and everything, only for mixing engineers to then replace the drums with samples. Yes, I'm reading because this is a question that Sam sent me. It's actually slightly paraphrased. Thank you, Sam, for the question. So, first of all, I know what you mean. I do that all the time as a mixing engineer. Not every single time, maybe every single time actually. Maybe, yeah. But why? And the thing is, we always need to remember that there's history, right? It's not started this way and it wasn't always this way. It wasn't this way, of course, in the 60s and 70s, it didn't exist. It wasn't like this in the 80s and the 90s, where sample replacement definitely was a thing. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, by the way, it's basically recording real drums, live drums, and then replace the actual sound with a sample, or layering the sound with another sample through what's called a trigger. And to be honest, I think what's really, really common is sample enhancement, well, sound enhancement through samples, not so much sound replacement. That's what I do all the time. I actually never replace. Imagine like the 60s, the 70s, what music production was at the time, mostly, the way it started was musicians would get together, write tunes, sing tunes, and they would just capture it. So it was a bunch of musicians in a room that were playing at their best because they would then capture it with microphones, and that was it. They had to balance everything. So without, redoing the entire history of recorded music, I think the point is we used to have drummers that were very complete, in that they would know how to play the drums, how to write for drums, how to arrange for drums, but also how to tune drums, because it was their instrument, so they'd know their instrument. They would bring their instrument around and they would know how to tune it and make it sound at their best. Now, this is still what session drummers do. Real good session drummers will have their own drums most of the time. They will know how to tune it and they will know how to make it sound at their best. And to be completely honest, you know what? Audio engineers don't need to do much with those. I remember distinctly Gavin Harrison. If you guys know who he is, it's one of my favorite drummers on earth and in history. And I saw him live a couple times. And one time it was at a drum clinic. And he started playing and they had forgotten to turn the PA on. So it wasn't, he came on stage and he thought everything was fine, and he just started playing and nothing was coming out of the speakers, but we could hear the raw drums. And I can tell you, honestly, his raw drums from the stage sounded basically the same as the records, minus a few things, because this is the other point. Drums in a room rarely sound like the drums we hear on records. It's an instrument that's changed so much aesthetically. It's very fake, not in a bad way, but we've worked on the drum sound for so long and we just made it better and better. We've enhanced it by putting multiple microphones. It's the only instrument really that is like that. We'll have a million microphones on drums to be able to have control over every single thing. And as time passed, if you think about the difference in music between the 60s and the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, we went to more and more polished, although in the 90s we had a bit more of a raw sounding phase. But more polished is usually in the aesthetic of the world. It's not just music, it's design, it's architecture, it's art in general, right? think this is a case mainly for mainstream music, not so much underground, but I believe modern metal and modern pop music, but many other genres actually, would not exist the way they are today without sample enhancement, like sound enhancement through triggering samples on live drums. So let's analyze it simply actually. Why would you use samples? Like, why do people use samples? There's a few fundamental needs for samples. One, the drummer isn't good enough with dynamics and with sound. So they don't produce consistent enough dynamics and they don't have a good sound in their hands. Two, the drum kit isn't good enough in quality. Three, the engineer isn't good enough. So the choice of mics, the choice of mic placement isn't good enough. Four, the producer isn't good enough. So the choice of drum kit, the choice of sound, the choice of engineer, the choice of studio was the wrong one. Not necessarily were they bad, but they were the wrong ones. Or five, the studio isn't good enough. This is actually what I personally do the most as a mixing engineer. I fix studios being not good enough, not big enough, or not the right ones. Or you want an aesthetic that sounds a little bit more produced, a little bit more fake or lo-fi, all that kind of stuff that you can't really necessarily do with real drums. So you see there's these 6 things, and there will be more probably I haven't thought of, but that means there's 6 reasons to use samples. So for you to not use samples, it means all of this 6 requirements are satisfied. So it means you have a good drummer, you have a good drum kit and the right one, you have a good engineer recording in a good studio with good microphones, good producer making the right choices, and in a genre that doesn't require that kind of aesthetic. So if all those things are true, if you have all of that, you don't need to replace anything. You don't need to use samples. But if you're missing one of those, then even just one of those, then you're probably going to use a sample. That doesn't mean you have to, but it is very likely that that's going to help. Now, as to why is everybody doing that? Why do people feel like they have to replace sounds with samples? I think is a major societal fail, because that's the way we work as human beings. We just copy other people, especially when the majority of people are doing something, we feel like we should do the same thing. So if many people use sample replacement because of problems in the recording, it will just become the norm to do it as part of the process. You know, there's so many people that I know that have told me that their vocal chain starts with RX. And I'm like, I don't need RX on most of the stuff I work on because it's just properly recorded, which doesn't really take much, by the way. But if you grow up using RX all the time because the first jobs you did and the first job you saw people working on were badly recorded, well then I guess it just becomes part of your workflow. And I think it's the same with sample replacement. Now about the thing, do we collectively not know how to record drums anymore? Well, there's also a bit of that, I think. Not everybody, but especially newer generations, which I consider myself part of like the transitional generation. So I've seen both. I've seen a bit of like old school and mainly new school, but I wasn't born in the digital era completely. But now computer music is so cheap, and to just get starter microphones and a starter interface in a computer is so affordable that people just make records in their bedrooms with few mics, with their audio interfaces, and they figure out things for themselves. They don't learn common practices that are actually done in studios, which is, you know, there's no shaming that. That's not what I'm doing, but I'm saying, yeah, that's how I learned to record drums, was in studios with a really good engineer that showed me how they recorded drums. Like, I could see it and I could replicate it and understand it, and so I learned to record drums. But if you don't go through that, you don't necessarily have enough practice on drums. And so, yeah, you kind of use technology to just help yourself. And you know, recording engineers putting that much effort into tuning drums, selecting drums, making sure the sound is great as they capture it. I feel like that's still happening, definitely happening at high levels. But at intermediate and lower level, where engineers are less skilled and projects crucially have less budget, that's not always possible. I genuinely struggle usually trying to convince bands to just book one more day of studios just to get the sounds before we start tracking. But getting a very good drum sound requires a good day, if I'm completely honest, most of the time. And so many times it just isn't enough budget for that, and because of that there isn't enough time, and so you will have to spend like 4 hours setting up, which means basically if you're quick setting up, it means like 2 hours including breaks to do the sound. And so you might not actually have the time to tune the drums or change drums, try a different snare drum, which by the way you have to have. So yeah, it's not necessarily the case. I think if everything is fine, like if everything is done properly, you genuinely do not need samples. But otherwise, they will help tremendously. There's nothing like the joy of recording a drum kit that sounds bananas without the need for samples. And there's going to be a video about that. Now, I want to show you how I use samples most of the time at the mixing stage, even if the drums are actually recorded right. It's sort of a cheating thing that I do, I guess. I guess it's mostly is a way to make my life a bit easier. Let me show you. All right, so I have these drums. A bit dark, admittedly, overall, so we can just push some of the top end on the group. That's pretty good. Ooh. Give it just a little bit more low end as well, because it's tasty. But okay, so in the kick drum, right, I have my low end, but my kick drum's made up of so many things. It's going to be the actual kick drum mic, one. And you can tell that it goes tuk tuk kick tuk tuk, which is the performance, and that is great, and that needs to stay in, but the low end is changing between the two hits. Now I could go like multi-band, there's a few things that I could do, but I feel like I can do something better. And I'll just show you what I would usually do by default when something like this happens, just because it becomes easier to do. So I'll duplicate the track with the inserts as well. Actually, no, without the inserts, I already had some stuff. We'll use my trigger 2, and this way it's just going to be, let's see, all of my stuff. I want to use my own. This one, the sub kick. Okay, but now I don't want that heartbeat thing. I don't want the I want it to be pretty steady so I can control my low end a lot better. So I'm making a fader to control the steadiness of my low end, basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go dynamics, no, 0. It's going to be the same thing, right? It's going to be the same sample all the time and layered with the original kit. I have this very, very steady low end. Another little thing that is very useful just make it a bit shorter. So pew, pew, down on that, a little bit more release now. Like very short, and then could I have done it differently? Yes, but this is just easier, and I've got so much control over it that why would I do it differently? I want to show you one more thing, because it's usually the other type of thing that I do. With this, I have a snare reverb that we've captured actually at the studio when we recorded this, which is pretty cool. Sort of 80s-like digital reverb, but that's not exactly what I was thinking about. Rooms. We have this, but I think the kick drum sounds great. The snare, it could be a bit better. So duplicate the snare. I'm just going to go trigger, but this time I'm going to go trigger mono to stereo. And let me try these. Actually, this is one of my sort of secrets a little bit. I like this. Yes. Why not? Why not? Why not? I'm making the blend, right? And realistically, I would actually make another track with this. What this is giving me is very sharp sound, big room, balanced, and very importantly, isolated from everything else, right? So I don't have all of the drums in there. This is pure control on the snare only. And I'll just leave it be in terms of dynamics a little bit more. I haven't done anything, and these samples are already EQ'd, by the way, so I don't need to push the top end, but if I wanted to push the top end, I could do that without affecting the bleed from the original snare, like the hi-hat, right? And now I have this control, which is just easy. It gives me width, it gives me depth, and it gives me top end. And all of that I can control completely independently from anything else. So it's just way easier, and there's no reason why you should play in hard mode unless you want to, right? And so now what we've done is, just with these two samples, if I mute them, already made it a bit more special, and we haven't done really much to it at all. So, you know. And by the way, is using samples cheating? Well, there was this quote, which I've always absolutely loved. I thought using loops was cheating, so I programmed my own using samples. I then thought using samples was cheating, so I recorded real drums. I then thought that programming it was cheating, so I learned to play drums for real. I then thought using bought drums was cheating, so I learned to make my own. I then thought using pre-made skins was cheating, so I killed a goat and skinned it. I then thought that that was cheating too, so I grew my own goat from a baby goat. I also think that is cheating, but I'm not sure where to go from here. I haven't made any music lately, what with the goat farming and all. And I think that truly represents the way I feel about cheating in any way in music. We're making something out of nothing. We are creating from nothing. So everything is cheating and nothing is at the same time. It just depends on how you want to do it and the result you want to achieve. Now, I know what everybody's thinking. What about AI? Well, AI, you know what? Is AI cheating? Maybe yes, maybe no. The thing is, I love playing my piano, I love playing guitar, I love spending time with bands in studios. I don't love prompting AI, go like, make an amazing pop music song type thing, and then it spits out something that is insanely good. Even if that was the case, even when that will be the case, where's the fun in that?